On the morning of September 3, 2023, Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar stepped outside, unaware that a simple dispute would mark the final moments of their lives. The day had started like any other in their Huntsville neighborhood, quiet except for the occasional sounds of passing cars and distant conversations. But before noon, the calm would shatter, gunfire, sirens, and the frantic voices of those who had just witnessed the unthinkable. Their final moments unfolded in a place they should have been safe. But safety is an illusion when tempers flare, and a single disagreement can turn into something irreversible. A conversation about a set of tires, seemingly trivial, escalated beyond control. What should have been nothing more than a minor dispute became the reason two young women never saw another day. Authorities later revealed that Tye Deshun Stevens, a 23-year-old man from Huntsville, was responsible. But before his name made headlines, before law enforcement launched a manhunt, he was just another neighbor. Someone familiar. Someone who, for reasons still unclear, made a split-second decision that ended two lives. The dispute unfolded on Bonnell Drive, a residential street lined with modest homes and parked cars. It wasn't the kind of place where people expected gun violence to erupt in broad daylight. But in today's world, these moments don't come with warnings. This wasn't just another crime story, it was a moment that changed everything. Two lives lost. Families left in grief. A community shaken. And an all too familiar reminder of how quickly things can escalate. If you're fascinated by real-life criminal investigations, whether they're cold cases, missing persons, or crimes that defy explanation, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping cases that reveal the dark truths behind these tragedies. And let us know in the comments, have you ever witnessed a dispute escalate in a way no one expected? Your insights could spark an important conversation.
About two women shot and killed in a North Huntsville apartment complex. Police actively hunting for that killer.
WAAY 31's Maddie McCaffrey joins us live from Bonnell Drive this afternoon. And Maddie, you've spent the day talking with a lot of people who knew the victims.
Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar's names are now tied to tragedy, but before their lives were cut short, they were two young women with stories of their own. Unfortunately, like many victims of violent crime, their personal histories have been largely overshadowed by the circumstances of their deaths. Public records provide only limited details about who they were beyond their connection to Huntsville, Alabama, and their presence on social media. Their backgrounds remain largely undocumented, an unsettling reality that raises deeper questions about how society remembers victims of violent crime. At 24 years old, Deja Morris had her entire future ahead of her. Those who knew her described her as a young woman with big dreams, someone who was carving out her path in life with determination and purpose. Although public records on her personal life are limited, one thing is clear: Deja was loved, and her loss left an irreplaceable void in the lives of those around her. Deja was a Huntsville native, deeply connected to the community she called home. Whether through friendships, social gatherings, or her online presence, she was someone people gravitated toward. She had a natural ability to connect with others, making an impression wherever she went. Social media played a big role in her life, as it does for many young people today. While she wasn't a mainstream influencer, she maintained an online presence that reflected her personality, interests, and daily experiences. Her posts showcased the highs and lows of young adulthood, the excitement of new opportunities, moments of self-reflection, and interactions with friends. She was part of a generation that used digital spaces to share their stories, document their lives, and engage with a wider audience. Despite this visibility, much of Deja's personal and professional journey remains unknown. Was she working toward a specific career? Did she have a passion she was pursuing? These are details that often get lost in crime reporting, where victims are reduced to their final moments instead of being recognized for the lives they lived. What we do know is that she was young, full of life, and had every reason to believe in a future that, tragically, was stolen from her.
I mean, it's still shocking to me. I'm still trying to process and figure out everything that's going on at the moment right now.
Dantrell White said Deja Morris was always willing to help others around her.
I mean, she was like a silly, goofy, a hooper athlete, competitive. She was just all around a great person. So for someone to do that is still not making any sense. I want to give prayers to her family and friends and hope that they heal and process this and just grieve.
On the other hand, Sequoia Lamar was just 20 years old, barely into adulthood, when her life was taken. She was still in the early stages of figuring out her path, discovering who she wanted to be and what she wanted from life. Those who knew her describe a young woman with energy, curiosity, and a presence that could light up a room. Like Deja, Sequoia was a Huntsville resident. She had built relationships in the community, forming friendships and connections that mattered to her. Whether through school, work, or social life, she was in the midst of a journey that was uniquely hers, one that was tragically cut short before she had the chance to truly explore her potential. Sequoia was active on social media, much like her friend. She engaged with her online community, sharing moments of joy, humor, and personal expression. Social media wasn't just a distraction for her, it was a way to connect, to be seen, and to interact with the world beyond her immediate surroundings. Her aspirations, like Deja's, remain largely undocumented. Was she in school? Was she working toward a career? The answers aren't widely available. What we do know is that she was a young woman with promise, someone who had plans for the future, plans that will never be realized. One of the most heartbreaking realities of crime reporting is that victims' lives often become overshadowed by their deaths. News headlines reduce them to names and ages, focusing more on the crime itself rather than who they were as individuals. Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar deserve to be remembered as more than just victims. They were real people with dreams, relationships, and unique identities, yet so much of their personal history remains untold. This isn't an isolated issue, it's a systemic problem in how true crime is covered. There's a troubling disparity in media attention when it comes to victims of different backgrounds. When crimes like these happen, the focus is almost always on the suspect, the details of the crime, and the legal process, but rarely on the people whose lives were stolen. The lack of publicly available background information on Deja and Sequoia highlights a recurring issue in true crime reporting: victim erasure. In many cases, the focus is disproportionately placed on the perpetrator, their motives, and the crime itself, while the victims become secondary to the story. When law enforcement releases minimal details, and families choose to grieve privately, the result is an unsettling gap in the narrative. This raises an important question. How do we remember victims when their stories are left untold? Without a clear picture of their lives, Deja and Sequoia risk becoming just another statistic. Two more names added to the long list of violent crime victims whose personal identities are lost in the shadows of the case. This isn't a unique occurrence. Many victims of homicide receive far less media attention than other cases, further deepening the issue of disproportionate coverage in crime reporting. Huntsville, Alabama, is known for its rapid growth, advanced technology industries, and vibrant culture. But beneath its thriving economy, like any city, it has its own challenges, including violent crime. While there's no clear evidence suggesting that Deja and Sequoia were engaged in any high-risk activities, their presence in the city places them within a larger context of rising violence in urban communities. Local crime data shows that Huntsville has seen an increase in violent incidents, with disputes escalating far too often into deadly confrontations. The argument that led to their deaths may seem trivial, but it's an example of how quickly tempers can flare, turning everyday disagreements into irreversible tragedies. When cases like this make the news, there's often a disproportionate focus on the accused. Tye Deshun Stevens, the 23-year-old suspect, has had his name widely circulated in reports, with details emerging about his movements before and after the crime. But for Deja and Sequoia, the facts remain scarce. What were their dreams? What kind of lives did they envision for themselves? Who are the people grieving their loss? The responsibility of keeping victims' names alive often falls on their families, advocacy groups, and investigative journalists willing to dig deeper. But when no one steps forward to tell their stories, their identities fade into the background, remembered only for how they died rather than how they lived. This case is a sobering reminder that true crime storytelling should do more than just recount the who, what, and where of a case. it should also humanize the victims. While justice was served in the sense that Stevens was apprehended, true justice means remembering Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar as more than just victims of a tragic dispute. By acknowledging the systemic issue of victim erasure, we can push for more responsible reporting that prioritizes the lives lost over the crimes committed. Their families, friends, and communities deserve the opportunity to have their voices heard, ensuring that Deja and Sequoia are not just names on a case file but individuals whose lives mattered. It was a quiet Thursday morning in Huntsville, Alabama. The sun had barely begun its ascent when the residents of Bunnell Drive awoke to what should have been an ordinary day. Yet, within hours, the neighborhood would become the backdrop for a tragic event that would claim the lives of two young women. On the morning of September 4, 2023, Deja Morris, 24, and Sequoia Lamar, 20, had no way of knowing that a simple errand would be their last. There was nothing particularly remarkable about that day. No early warning signs, no indication that a deadly confrontation was about to unfold. At around 10:29 a.m., the two women were in the 4400 block of Bunnell Drive, a residential area lined with modest homes and apartment complexes. The street, like many others in Huntsville, was a mix of quiet normalcy and the occasional dispute between neighbors. There was no indication that violence was brewing until it was too late. Bunnell Drive sits in a part of Huntsville that has seen its share of disturbances, though it is not widely known as a high-crime area. Huntsville itself has a crime rate that fluctuates, with violent incidents occurring sporadically across different neighborhoods. While some residents recall past altercations in the area, there were no reports indicating that the location had been a hotspot for violence leading up to this particular morning. Despite this, the events that unfolded would cast a dark shadow over the street, leaving an undeniable mark on those who witnessed it. What exactly triggered the argument remains unclear, but reports suggest that the dispute between Morris, Lamar, and their neighbor, 23-year-old Tye Deshun Stevens, was over tires. It was an issue that, under normal circumstances, might have led to frustration, perhaps a heated exchange, but never death. However, something about this particular disagreement escalated beyond control. Words were exchanged, tensions rose, and before anyone had a chance to defuse the situation, the conflict turned fatal. Accounts of the argument remain sparse, with law enforcement providing limited details about the precise nature of the disagreement. Were the tires on the wrong property? Had there been an ongoing feud between the parties involved? Or was this an isolated dispute that spiraled out of control in a matter of seconds? What is certain is that, at some point during the exchange, Stevens made a decision that would change everything. At 10:29 a.m., gunshots shattered the morning stillness. What should have been a routine argument over property turned into a deadly confrontation. Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar never had a chance to walk away. The suspect, Tye Deshun Stevens, allegedly fired multiple rounds, striking both women. The exact number of shots fired has not been disclosed, but the injuries were fatal. Witnesses, if any were present, have not publicly spoken about what they saw in those horrifying moments. By the time the gunfire stopped, both Morris and Lamar lay lifeless. The argument was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. When Huntsville Police Department, HPD, officers arrived at the scene, they found both victims suffering from gunshot wounds. There was no opportunity to save them. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Crime scene investigators quickly secured the area, working to determine the precise details of what had occurred. Detectives gathered evidence, speaking with anyone who might have seen or heard something. However, the immediate aftermath of a shooting is often chaotic, and the full picture was not yet clear. As the crime scene was processed, another question loomed. Where was Tye Deshun Stevens? HPD faced the critical task of identifying who was responsible for the deaths of Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar. The crime had taken place in broad daylight at approximately 10:29 a.m. in a residential neighborhood. While initial reports suggested that a dispute over tires led to the fatal altercation, law enforcement needed to confirm who pulled the trigger and why. The first step in solving any crime is determining the last people to interact with the victims. Witnesses in the area provided crucial information, stating that a heated argument had taken place shortly before the gunfire erupted. Several neighbors reported seeing a young man fleeing the scene in a silver vehicle immediately after the shots were fired. Detectives quickly worked to obtain eyewitness testimonies, canvassing the neighborhood and speaking with anyone who might have seen or heard something. Though details were still emerging, the name Tye Deshun Stevens surfaced early in the investigation. He was a 23-year-old Huntsville resident, and initial inquiries suggested he had prior interactions with at least one of the victims. As police pieced together witness statements, a clearer picture of events began to emerge. Investigators received multiple accounts stating that Stevens had been involved in an argument with Morris and Lamar shortly before the shooting. While the exact nature of their dispute remained uncertain, law enforcement had their first major lead. The next challenge was tracking him down. Once HPD detectives identified Tye Deshun Stevens as the primary suspect, law enforcement launched an extensive manhunt to locate him. Given the severity of the crime, the U.S. Marshals Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force was called in to assist in tracking him down. The task force specializes in apprehending dangerous fugitives, and with a double homicide on record, time was of the essence. Investigators learned that Stevens had fled the Huntsville area immediately after the shooting. He was last seen driving a silver vehicle with an unidentified license plate, making it difficult to track his movements in real time. Authorities issued a warrant for his arrest, and HPD officers began monitoring locations where he was known to frequent, including residences of family members and close associates. For 2 days, Stevens managed to evade capture. But on September 6, 2023, authorities received a crucial tip. Stevens was in Anniston, Alabama, a city located nearly 100 miles from Huntsville. With this information, the U.S. Marshals moved in quickly. On the day of his capture, Stevens was reportedly trying to keep a low profile. However, his presence in the area did not go unnoticed. Officers, equipped with arrest warrants and intelligence on his possible whereabouts, surrounded a residence where Stevens was believed to be hiding. With little room to escape, he was taken into custody without incident. The rapid nature of the arrest, less than a week after the murders, demonstrated the efficiency of coordinated law enforcement efforts. But while Stevens was now in custody, detectives still needed to solidify the case against him. To ensure a conviction, prosecutors would need hard evidence linking Stevens to the crime. While witness statements were valuable, forensic science and physical evidence would be the foundation of the case against him. One of the first steps in this process was ballistics analysis. Given that multiple rounds were fired at the crime scene, investigators recovered bullet casings from the area and began testing them against known firearm records. If Stevens had used a legally registered gun, investigators could potentially link the bullets to him. If he had used an unregistered weapon, they would need to rely on other forensic methods. Additionally, forensic experts examined gunshot residue. If Stevens had fired the weapon, traces of gunpowder could have been left on his hands or clothing. Even if he had attempted to wash them off, certain chemical compounds could still be detected through specialized tests. While HPD has not publicly disclosed the specific forensic evidence used in the case, these investigative techniques likely played a role in building the case against Stevens. Another key element was surveillance footage. While the crime itself was not necessarily caught on camera, nearby homes and businesses may have captured Stevens' vehicle fleeing the scene. Investigators reviewed available footage to establish a timeline of his movements before and after the shooting. If surveillance footage placed him at the crime scene shortly before gunfire erupted, it would serve as further proof of his involvement. With Stevens behind bars and evidence mounting against him, the case moved swiftly. However, the speed at which justice is served is often debated in high-profile cases. Some believe that the rapid apprehension of Stevens and the collection of forensic evidence showed an effective legal system at work. Others argue that while the arrest happened quickly, true justice is not just about capturing a suspect, it's about ensuring that the victims' voices are heard and their families receive the closure they deserve. As the case proceeds through the courts, the focus will shift toward the trial and whether the prosecution can present a compelling case that leads to conviction. For now, one thing remains clear: the deaths of Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar serve as a reminder of how quickly a dispute can escalate, leaving behind a devastating impact on families and communities. Do you think justice was served quickly enough in this case? Should there be stricter laws to prevent violent disputes from escalating? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on solved and unsolved cases, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, where every story deserves to be told. In many homicides, the motive becomes clear through investigations, whether it's a personal dispute, a crime of passion, or a premeditated act. However, in the case of Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar, one major question lingers. Why did an argument over tires turn deadly in an instant? From the information available, the confrontation between the two women and Tye Deshun Stevens appeared to be a disagreement that should have ended with raised voices at most. Yet, it resulted in 2 lives lost within seconds. Law enforcement has not publicly disclosed whether there were pre-existing tensions between Stevens and the victims. Was there an underlying conflict that hadn't been reported before? Or did the argument simply escalate due to emotions running high at that moment? Several possibilities have been raised by crime analysts and legal experts. One is that Stevens felt disrespected and reacted impulsively. In many violent crimes, especially those that stem from seemingly minor disputes, the perpetrator's inability to control their emotions plays a key role. The presence of a firearm may have also contributed. When someone has a weapon on hand, the decision to use deadly force can happen in a split second. Another possibility is that the situation escalated due to miscommunication or perceived threats. Did Stevens believe the argument was becoming physical? Was he acting out of perceived self-defense, even if there was no real danger? With no reports indicating that Morris or Lamar were armed, investigators would have to determine why Stevens made the choice to shoot rather than walk away. The lack of a clear motive makes this case even more tragic. If this truly was an impulsive act rather than a premeditated attack, then 2 people lost their lives over a decision made in mere seconds, a decision that Stevens will have to answer for in court. Another major unanswered question in this case revolves around the firearm used in the shooting. Unlike many other homicide investigations where police release information about the weapon, its ownership, and its origins, there has been no public disclosure about the gun used by Stevens. This raises several critical concerns. 1. Was the gun legally owned? If Stevens legally purchased the firearm, it would suggest that he had no prior restrictions on gun ownership. However, if he obtained it illegally, it would indicate a larger issue of unregulated firearms falling into the hands of dangerous individuals. 2. Was the firearm registered? Law enforcement agencies often run firearm traces through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, to determine who purchased the weapon and when. If the gun was unregistered or stolen, it could mean it was part of illegal firearms trafficking. 3. Why hasn't the weapon's caliber been revealed? In many cases, police will disclose the type of gun used, whether it was a handgun, a revolver, or a semi-automatic firearm. This information is often crucial in understanding the nature of the crime. However, the absence of details in this case suggests that authorities may still be investigating how Stevens obtained the weapon. 4. Could there be additional charges related to the firearm? If Stevens was not legally allowed to own a gun, due to a previous conviction or other legal restrictions, he could face additional weapons charges. The tragic deaths of Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar are not isolated incidents. Across the country, there has been a disturbing increase in homicides sparked by seemingly minor disagreements, disputes over parking spaces, fast food orders, and, in this case, a disagreement about tires. Experts point to several factors contributing to this trend. Gun accessibility plays a major role. When firearms are readily available, conflicts that might have once ended in an argument or a fistfight now turn deadly in seconds. The impulse to react with violence, rather than de-escalate, has become a growing concern. There's also the issue of heightened emotions and reduced conflict resolution skills. Many individuals, particularly those with poor emotional regulation, view any disagreement as a challenge to their pride or status. Instead of walking away, they escalate the situation, sometimes to fatal levels. Another key factor is the instantaneous nature of communication in today's world. Heated confrontations can escalate rapidly when people feel like they're being recorded or challenged publicly. The fear of embarrassment or losing face pushes individuals to act impulsively, with deadly consequences. The reality is that Morris and Lamar should still be alive today. A disagreement over tires should never have led to their deaths, and yet, this case fits into an alarming pattern. Many violent confrontations show warning signs before they explode into tragedy. Recognizing these signs, and knowing how to respond, can prevent unnecessary loss of life. Some common red flags include heavy checkmark escalating language. When a conversation shifts from disagreement to threats, personal insults, or shouting, it's a sign that emotions are taking over. Heavy checkmark aggressive body language, clenched fists, invading personal space, or pacing can indicate rising anger. Heavy checkmark sudden fixation on an argument. If someone refuses to walk away or becomes overly fixated on proving themselves right, it can signal an unwillingness to de-escalate. Knowing how to de-escalate is just as crucial. Heavy checkmark step away when possible. Many conflicts escalate simply because no one is willing to back down. Removing yourself from the situation can prevent violence. Heavy checkmark use calming language. Phrases like, "It's not that serious," or, "Let's just move on," can defuse tension. Heavy checkmark avoid physical confrontations. Even if someone appears threatening, engaging them physically can increase the likelihood of violence. Unfortunately, some conflicts escalate too quickly for intervention, as may have been the case with Morris and Lamar. But in other situations, stepping back could mean the difference between life and death. Life can change in an instant. One moment, Deja Morris and Sequoia Lamar were going about their day, and the next, they were gone. A disagreement over something as insignificant as a set of tires escalated to an irreversible tragedy. It's a chilling reminder that violence often erupts from the most unexpected places, and that no one is truly prepared for how quickly a situation can turn deadly. What makes this case especially painful is that it didn't have to happen. This wasn't a premeditated crime, nor was it the result of a long-standing feud. It was a sudden act of violence, a decision made in a split second that ended 2 lives and shattered many others. When we talk about cases like this, there's often a focus on the crime itself, the confrontation, the weapon, the suspect. But at the heart of this story are 2 young women whose lives were unfairly cut short. They were more than just victims. All too often, victims in violent crimes become footnotes in their own stories. Their names appear briefly in news articles, their faces flash across a few TV screens, and then, as time passes, they fade from public memory. But Morris and Lamar mattered. They had families, dreams, and futures ahead of them. They were real people, not just names attached to a crime. It's important to remember them not just for how they died, but for the lives they lived. At Crime X_Vault, we believe in telling the full story, not just of the crime, but of the people impacted by it. Every victim deserves to be remembered, and their stories deserve to be told with care and respect. This case isn't just a tragedy, it's a lesson in the consequences of unchecked anger, impulsive decisions, and the dangers of easy access to firearms. So how can we, as a society, prevent similar tragedies from happening? Heavy checkmark conflict de-escalation education, schools, workplaces, and communities need to emphasize peaceful resolution techniques. People must learn how to walk away from escalating arguments before they turn violent. Heavy checkmark gun violence awareness. While gun laws vary by state, the reality is that many acts of violence happen because firearms are too easily accessible in heated moments. Understanding the responsibility that comes with owning a weapon is crucial. Heavy checkmark community support networks. Many violent confrontations stem from deep-seated frustrations, mental health struggles, and social tensions. More accessible community resources could help people find non-violent ways to address conflicts. While no single solution can prevent every act of violence, raising awareness and encouraging de-escalation strategies could help reduce the number of senseless deaths. At the end of the day, this case isn't just about one argument that went too far, it's about a larger societal issue. Small disputes should not end in gunfire. People should not be afraid that a simple disagreement could cost them their lives. So, we ask you, how do you think violent confrontations like this can be prevented? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation about awareness, prevention, and change. And if you found this case thought-provoking, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because every story, every victim, deserves to be remembered.